The words hit me like a slap across the face, and for the first time in 32 years, I understood what it meant to reach the end of my rope. "Sarah, you're being dramatic again," my mother said, not even looking up from her phone as she dismissed my concerns about the family's mounting debt crisis. "Just figure it out like you always do." I stood there in my parents' cluttered living room, surrounded by the familiar chaos of unpaid bills scattered across the coffee table. My brother Jake sprawled on the couch, scrolling through his phone, and my sister Emma painting her nails on the carpet. It was a typical Sunday afternoon, nothing special, no occasion, just another family gathering where I'd been summoned to solve everyone else's problems. The silence stretched between us thick with years of unspoken resentment. I had driven 40 minutes through traffic to get here, leaving behind the quiet sanctuary of my own apartment, because Mom had called saying it was urgent. Now I realized the urgency was simply that Jake needed money for his rent again, and Emma wanted me to co-sign for a car loan she had no intention of paying back. "Dramatic," I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. "I've been paying your mortgage for 8 months, Jake's credit card bills, and Emma's student loans. I'm asking for a conversation about boundaries, and I'm being dramatic." Jake finally looked up from his phone, that familiar smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "Come on, Sarah, you make good money. It's not like you're struggling." He gestured around the room as if my financial stability was some kind of joke. "Besides, family helps family, right?" Emma blew on her freshly painted nails and chimed in with her trademark sarcasm. "Yeah, Sarah, don't be so selfish. Some of us didn't get the smart gene and land cushy corporate jobs." She said it with a laugh, but the words cut deep. They always did. I had heard these refrains my entire life. Sarah will figure it out. Sarah's got it handled. Sarah doesn't mind. Sarah's the responsible one. Somewhere along the way, I had become the family's emotional and financial ATM, dispensing solutions and support without question, without thanks, and certainly without reciprocation. Mom finally looked up from her phone, her expression already shifting to that wounded look she perfected years ago. "I don't understand why you're being so difficult. We're your family. This is what families do for each other." But that was the problem, wasn't it? This wasn't what families did for each other. This was what I did for them. When had any of them ever asked how I was doing? When had they ever offered to help me with anything? When had they ever even remembered my birthday without Facebook reminding them? "What do you need from me today?" I asked, cutting straight to the point. I was tired of pretending this was a social visit. Jake perked up immediately. "Well, since you asked, I'm a little short on rent this month, and next month, maybe the month after that too." He laughed as if his chronic irresponsibility was charming. "You know how it is with the gig economy." The gig economy. That's what he called his refusal to hold down a steady job. Jake was 35 years old and had never worked anywhere longer than 6 months. He had a different excuse every time. The boss was unreasonable, the work was beneath him, the commute was too long, the schedule didn't work with his creative pursuits. "And I need that cosign," Emma added, not looking up from her nails. "The car dealership says they'll hold the car until Friday, but I need the paperwork signed by tomorrow." Emma was 28 and had already defaulted on 3 previous loans I had co-signed for. Each time she had promised it would be different. Each time I had believed her because I wanted to be the good sister, the supportive one. Each time I had ended up making the payments myself while she moved on to the next shiny thing that caught her attention. Mom was watching me with that expectant look, the one that said I was being unreasonable for even hesitating. "And I hate to ask, honey, but the mortgage payment is due Wednesday and your father's disability check doesn't come until next week." My father, who hadn't spoken a word during this entire exchange, looked up from his newspaper with a slight nod, as if to say this was all perfectly normal and reasonable. I felt something crack inside my chest. It wasn't dramatic or explosive. It was quiet, like the sound of ice giving way under too much weight. For years, I had been holding this family together with my money, my time, my emotional labor, and my silence. I had been the shock absorber for everyone else's bad decisions, the safety net that allowed them to never face real consequences. "No," I said. The word hung in the air like a foreign language none of them understood. "No," Mom repeated, her voice rising with indignation. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean, no. I'm not giving Jake money for rent. I'm not co-signing Emma's loan, and I'm not paying your mortgage anymore." Jake sat up straighter, his casual demeanor shifting to something harder. "Are you serious right now? You're going to let me get evicted? You're going to let your own parents lose their house?" Mom's voice had taken on that trembling quality she used when she wanted to make me feel guilty. Emma finally looked up from her nails, her eyes narrowing. "Wow, Sarah. I always knew you were uptight, but I didn't think you were actually cruel." Their reactions were so predictable, so perfectly orchestrated that I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I picked up my purse and walked toward the door. "Where are you going?" Mom called after me. "We're not done talking about this." But we were done. We had been done for years. I was just the last one to realize it. I drove home in a daze, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. By the time I reached my apartment, my phone was already buzzing with angry texts and missed calls. I turned it off and sat in my living room, surrounded by the peace and order I had created for myself, and tried to understand what had just happened. For the first time in my adult life, I had said no to my family, and the sky hadn't fallen. The next morning, I called my therapist, Dr. Martinez, and managed to get an emergency session. "Tell me what happened," she said, settling into her chair with that patient expression I had come to appreciate over the past year of sessions. I had started therapy initially for work stress, but our conversations had increasingly circled back to my family dynamics. Dr. Martinez had been gently suggesting for months that my relationship with my family wasn't healthy, but I had always found reasons to excuse their behavior. I said no, I told her, and then the whole story came tumbling out. The endless financial demands, the emotional manipulation, the way they had turned my love for them into a weapon against me. "How do you feel about saying no?" she asked. "Terrified," I admitted, and relieved, and guilty, all at the same time. "That's understandable. You've been in this pattern for a long time. Breaking it feels scary because it's unfamiliar, but it also feels right because you're finally honoring your own needs." Dr. Martinez helped me understand something I had never considered before, that enabling wasn't the same as helping, and that my financial support had actually been preventing my family from growing up and taking responsibility for their own lives. "What do you want to do next?" she asked. "I don't know. I've never thought about what I wanted before. It was always about what they needed." "That's exactly where we need to start." Over the next few days, I began to take small but significant actions. I called my bank and removed my family members as authorized users on my credit cards. I changed my direct deposit so that the money I had been automatically transferring to my parents' account each month stayed in my own savings instead. I blocked Jake and Emma on Venmo. Each action felt like removing a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying. My phone continued to buzz with increasingly frantic messages. Jake's texts started out angry, then shifted to pleading, then back to angry again. Emma alternated between sarcasm and emotional manipulation, sending me long messages about how I was destroying the family and how disappointed she was in the person I had become. But it was Mom's messages that cut the deepest. She had perfected the art of guilt over 32 years of practice, and she deployed every weapon in her arsenal. I was selfish. I was heartless. I was forgetting everything they had done for me. I was choosing money over family. That last one almost broke my resolve. But then I remembered what Dr. Martinez had said. They're not upset because you don't love them. They're upset because you're not managing their emotions for them anymore. The breaking point came 2 weeks after that Sunday afternoon confrontation. I was having coffee with my best friend Lisa when my phone started ringing. I had been ignoring calls from my family, but this number was unfamiliar. "Sarah? This is Officer Thompson with the County Sheriff's Department. Your mother asked me to call you about an eviction notice?" My blood ran cold. "I'm sorry, what?" She said there's been a family emergency and asked if I could reach out to you about helping with some past due mortgage payments. I told her this isn't really what we do, but she seemed pretty desperate. I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar pull of guilt and responsibility. They had actually called the police to try to manipulate me into giving them money. Officer Thompson, I appreciate you calling, but this is a family matter that needs to be resolved between us. There's no emergency. After I hung up, Lisa looked at me with concern. What was that about? I told her everything, about the years of financial support, the emotional manipulation, the way I had become the family's default solution to every problem. Lisa listened without judgment, occasionally shaking her head in disbelief. Sarah, she said when I finished, I've been your friend for 10 years, and I had no idea it was this bad. You never talked about it. I was embarrassed, I admitted, and I thought it was normal. I thought this was just what families were like. This isn't what families are like. This is what dysfunctional families are like. Healthy families don't drain one person dry to keep everyone else afloat. That conversation with Lisa was a turning point. She helped me see my situation from the outside, without the fog of guilt and obligation that had clouded my judgment for so long. The harassment from my family escalated over the following weeks. Jake showed up at my apartment building demanding to be let up. When I refused, he sat in the lobby for 3 hours telling anyone who would listen that his cruel sister was letting him become homeless. Emma started a social media campaign about the importance of family loyalty, posting vague but pointed messages about people who abandon their loved ones in times of need. She tagged mutual friends and extended family members, clearly hoping to shame me into compliance. Mom enlisted my father's sister, Aunt Carol, to call and lecture me about my responsibilities as the eldest child. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was actually the middle child, but I had been functioning as the eldest for so long that everyone had forgotten Jake was 2 years older than me. But the worst was when they started spreading lies about my reasons for cutting them off. According to the story making its way through our extended family, I had gotten greedy and decided I was too good for them now that I had a successful career. They painted me as the villain in a story where they were the innocent victims of my sudden cruelty. The lies hurt more than I expected them to. I had spent my entire adult life sacrificing for this family, and now they were destroying my reputation to avoid taking responsibility for their own actions. They're doing this because it's working, Dr. Martinez explained during one of our sessions. They've escalated their behavior because their old methods aren't getting results. This is actually a good sign. It means your boundaries are holding. It doesn't feel good, I said. It feels like I'm being punished for finally standing up for myself. You are being punished, and that tells you everything you need to know about the health of these relationships. 3 months after that Sunday afternoon, I was having dinner at Lisa's house when she asked me a simple question that changed everything. When was the last time you felt truly happy? I started to give her an automatic answer about work or a recent vacation, but then I stopped and really thought about it. When was the last time I had felt genuinely happy, not just temporarily distracted from my stress and obligations? I don't remember, I admitted. That's not normal, Sarah. You're 32 years old, you have a great job, you're smart and funny and kind. You should be happy. The fact that you can't remember the last time you felt happy tells you everything you need to know about the cost of maintaining relationships that drain you. That night, I made a decision that felt both terrifying and liberating. I wrote letters to each member of my family, not emails that could be forwarded or texts that could be screenshot, but actual handwritten letters. I kept the letters simple and direct. I explained that I needed space to focus on my own mental health and well-being. I told them that I loved them, but that I could no longer maintain our relationship in its current form. I said that if they were interested in building healthier connections in the future, I would be open to that conversation, but only after they had taken responsibility for their own lives and financial situations. I mailed the letters on a Friday afternoon and then blocked all of their phone numbers and social media accounts. The silence that followed was deafening. For the first few weeks, I jumped every time my phone rang, expecting to somehow hear from them despite the blocks I'd put in place. I checked my email obsessively, looking for messages that never came. I drove different routes to work to avoid passing by their neighborhood. But slowly, gradually, the silence became peaceful instead of oppressive. I started using the money I had been sending to my family to pay off my own student loans early. I signed up for a pottery class I had been interested in for years but never had time for. I began planning a vacation to Europe, something I had always wanted to do but had never been able to afford because of my family's constant financial emergencies. For the first time in my adult life, I was living for myself instead of managing everyone else's crises. 6 months after I cut contact, I ran into my cousin Michelle at the grocery store. She was my mother's niece, and I braced myself for a confrontation about abandoning the family. Instead, she hugged me and said, "I'm proud of you." I stared at her in surprise. "What?" My mom told me what happened. She said, "Your mom has been calling all the relatives, trying to get us to pressure you into coming back and paying their bills again." And most of us told her that it was about time someone held them accountable for their choices. "Sarah, we've all watched your family take advantage of you for years. We just didn't know how to say anything without causing family drama." I felt tears prick at my eyes. All this time, I had thought I was alone in seeing the dysfunction. I had assumed that everyone else believed my family's version of events. "Jake got a real job," Michelle continued. "Apparently, when you stopped paying his rent, he managed to find steady work pretty quickly. Emma's living with a roommate now and actually making her car payments on time. And your parents, well, they're struggling, but they're figuring it out." "They're okay?" I asked, hating how much I still cared about their well-being. "They're learning to be okay, which is what they should have been doing all along instead of making you responsible for their lives." That conversation with Michelle was the validation I didn't know I needed. It confirmed what Dr. Martinez had been telling me for months, that stepping back wasn't cruel, it was necessary, not just for me, but for them too. A year after that Sunday afternoon that changed everything, I was sitting in my therapist's office for what would be our last regular session. "How are you feeling?" Dr. Martinez asked. "Happy," I said, and realized it was true. For the first time in years, I'm actually happy. What does that feel like? I thought about it for a moment. Light, like I'm not carrying weight that doesn't belong to me anymore, like I can breathe deeply without worrying about what crisis I'll need to solve next. Do you miss them? I miss the idea of them. I miss having a family, but I don't miss the stress, the guilt, the constant drain on my energy and resources. And I've realized that what I thought was love was actually codependency. Have you thought about what you might want from those relationships in the future? "I don't know if I want anything from them," I said honestly. "I've built a life that works for me. I have friends who actually care about my well-being, not just what I can do for them. I have hobbies and interests and goals that are mine. I'm not sure I want to risk losing that by letting them back in." That's okay. You don't have to decide that now. The important thing is that you're making choices based on what's healthy for you, not based on guilt or obligation. 2 weeks after that final therapy session, I received a letter in the mail. My name and address were written in my mother's familiar handwriting. I held the envelope for a long time before opening it, preparing myself for another guilt trip or emotional manipulation. Instead, I found a short note that surprised me. "Sarah, I've been thinking about what you wrote in your letter. I didn't understand it at first, and I was angry. But I've had time to think, and I'm starting to see that maybe you were right about some things. I don't know if we can fix what's broken, but I wanted you to know that I'm sorry for taking advantage of your kindness. You deserved better from us. I hope you're happy. Love, Mom." I read the letter 3 times, looking for the hidden manipulation or the subtle request for money. But it seemed genuine, a simple acknowledgement and apology. I didn't respond to the letter, but I kept it. It felt like a small step toward the possibility of something healthier in the future, though I wasn't ready to take that step yet. Maybe someday I would be, or maybe I wouldn't. Either way, it would be my choice to make, not a decision forced on me by guilt or obligation. That evening, I called Lisa to tell her about the letter. "How do you feel about it?" she asked. Cautiously hopeful, I guess, but also protective of the peace I've found. I'm not willing to give that up for anyone, even family. Good, that's exactly how you should feel. After we hung up, I sat on my balcony with a cup of tea, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. For the first time in my life, I wasn't worried about anyone else's problems. I wasn't calculating how much money I needed to transfer or which crisis I needed to solve first. I was simply present in my own life, in my own body, in my own peace. The weight of silence had become the gift of freedom, and I finally understood that sometimes the most loving thing you can do, for others and for yourself, is to walk away. I thought about that Sunday afternoon a year ago, when I had stood in my parents' living room and said no for the first time. That moment had felt like an ending, like I was destroying something precious. Now I understood it had been a beginning, the beginning of my real life, the one where I mattered too. The silence around me was no longer empty. It was full of possibility, full of peace, full of the quiet joy that comes from finally coming home to yourself. And for the first time in 32 years, that was enough.